Great. I think we can get started. Good evening, everyone. Hello. I hope you're having a good day today. And welcome to yet another webinar by Social Beat with me, Sharanya, and our guest for the day, Aditya Rao. Here we will be discussing about an important question that we ponder when it comes to product innovation. How does the right market research help in product innovation? I am Sharanya Venugopal, AVP Client Success at Social Beat, and we are very fortunate to have Aditya Rao joining us today. Hi, Aditya. Welcome to the webinar, and thank you so much for taking our time to connect with us today.
Hi, Sharanya. Thanks so much for calling me over.
Okay, let me start off by giving everybody a brief introduction about you, Aditya, and the tremendous work that you've done in the area of research and consumer insights. Aditya, in the last 16 years, has juggled many roles: a market researcher, a visiting faculty, and a career counselor. In the year 2020, he ventured into the world of entrepreneurship through his company, Aditya Rao Consultants, in which he undertakes market research projects and helps and trains small and medium businesses on their consumer insight and research journey. He has also been a career counselor with Brainwonders, which is one of the leading career guiding and counselling centers in India. He has been a visiting faculty for subjects such as marketing research, innovation and entrepreneurship, research methodology, and quantitative techniques in marketing across various MBA institutes in Mumbai for over 9 years. His burning desire is to make the world of insights accessible to everybody, not just for brands, but also for people so that they can make life decisions in an informed way. We thought we could add to this burning desire of his and have him today to discuss how market research can help with product innovation. Before I hand it over to you, Aditya, to everybody who's tuned in, thank you so much for taking out the time on a Tuesday evening to join us in this discussion. And do drop in all of your questions in the comment section below. We will be taking them at the end of the session. Great. Without further ado, I hand it over to you, Aditya, and let's together try and answer this question of how does right market research help product innovation? Over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Sharanya. May you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Rather, it's a pleasure to come here, and I hope this session will be insightful, and at the end of the day, be able to answer the question which we all are starting out to answer. So, but before I get into how marketing research helps in innovation per se or in product innovation, I thought it was important to decode what marketing research is in simple terms. So if I were to actually explain what marketing research is all about, marketing research is the bridge between the client, who is the brand or the company, and the consumer. So if you can just move to the next slide. So as I said, it's a bridge for feedback. So what really happens is that the brand has certain products or services which it passes on to the consumer. The consumer uses it and thereby gives the feedback back to the brand. And this is the circle which goes on continuing over and over again. And that's in the process of this, somewhere your innovations also come into being. So that's something which will come into being. And this is the role of marketing research per se. Yeah, if we move on. So, but before we start all this again, I think there are two things which really stand out for me. There are two quotes which really stand out. And if we move ahead, I'll just show you these two quotes. These are some things which stick by me and have been, in my mind whenever I do marketing or whenever I advise my clients. So the first quote is the one by J. Beer, who says that make marketing so useful that people will pay for it. See, at the end of the day, what are we in the process of? We are in the business of making the consumers or our customers' life simple. So if at the end of the day, the customer or your consumer is willing to pay you money for the services that you offer, that's when you have cracked it. Yeah. The other aspect is, which is very important and probably most of us sometimes tend to forget, is the fact that you need to be your best customer, live the customer's lifestyle. This is something which we tend to forget. And the minute we step into a consumer's shoes or a customer's shoes, that's when you're able to understand what he or she is going through and what is the problem that we need to solve. Having said that, if we go ahead, it boils down to the ICC approach. This is not the International Cricket Council. It boils down to 3 words. 1, it is about being in the investigative mode. I don't mean that we have to be Sherlock Holmes and go behind the consumers all the time. But whenever we meet them, we need to understand them first. And that is the whole crux of the marketing research journey. If you look at great brands, they have put the consumer at the center and have developed the entire ecosystem of their brands or products around them. The second is the contextualization. You need to understand where the consumer is coming from. See, every consumer or a customer has a little bit of baggage that he or she brings to the table. It's our duty to understand that and thereby connect the dots between the investigation, what we have done, the contextualization, that is the story of the life of the consumer, and we get the dots together so as to understand the whole ecosystem, how he operates. Now, this is very important because if you see great brands do this very well. See, more often than not, we meet our consumers or our customers, but we try to focus the entire discussion on our brands, not on them. The minute we focus it on our brands, it becomes a marketing myopia. If I'm use the word, it's a myopic approach. But as soon as we look at it from their point of view, it becomes a much more broader perspective that we are trying to gauge. Yeah, we can move on. So there are a few facts, although, that we have to keep in mind in this case. The first fact is that the consumer or people's attention spans are going down. If you go to the next slide, we'll see that the attention span of human beings is less than that of a goldfish. And mind you, I have not got a more recent data out of this. It is 2013. This is 8 years back. Now, if we look at the current scenario post-COVID 2019, I'm sure this would have gone down much further. So that is why when you look at YouTube and other genres, right, you have that 5-second window wherein you can skip the ad after 5 seconds. Why do we do that? Because if you are able to garner the consumer's attention in the first 5 seconds, then you'll garner the attention for the rest of the ad. And I think the next slide actually, substantiates what I'm trying to say. If we move ahead, what we see is that the attention span in a 30-second ad, if you can just move on, 1/3 of the consumers lose their focus. So while we spend a lot of money on celebrities, on creating adverts, it is that 90% of the consumers have their attention in the first 10 seconds, but in the next 20 seconds, if you see, you lose nearly 24% of the consumers, which is in the first 30 seconds, 1/3 of the consumers lose the plot. However attractive the ad may be. So you need to understand this while creating the marketing offering or the product offering that you're trying to do, or you're trying to communicate about it. The next point, If you can go ahead. The other aspect is people want someone to listen to them. Whenever you're trying to go and meet a consumer, and I'm going to talk of this as we move ahead, because this is just the contextualization that we are trying to do. What is important is that we need to understand them. They want us to hear them out. That's where the magic really happens. And the minute we are able to marry what the consumer wants with our business objective, that's where we create wonders. Yeah, if we move on. The other aspect is that the stimulus and the methodology should be looked in sync. Now, if you want a consumer to try a product, you can't try an online approach because there are a lot of logistics involved in the entire process. You'll have to ensure that you'll have to give the product to the consumer at the end of the day. He tries it and then gives a feedback. So an online methodology may not be as effective as a face-to-face in that case. Of course, COVID has actually changed the entire game. We'll come to that towards the end. But in a traditional approach, it becomes very difficult to understand what the consumer wants if in the case of a product. However, if you're looking at an advertisement, it is very simple. You can do it online. You can just make them see the ad and give a reaction to that. Yeah, we can go on. So also what I come across very often is the fact that marketers come to me and say that the consumer was not very articulate. And this is an aspect which I think boils down to us, because we need to ensure that they tell us stories of their lives. And the minute they tell us stories, if you look at Maggie, there were case studies wherein they actually created a pack of different people, right, on the faces being there. So the whole aspect of the consumer being at the center of it becomes more substantiated when you tell a story. Yeah, and you ensure that they do that. You can move ahead. Now, having said all this, this is the context that the consumer is today. Now, how do we use the marketing research exercise when you're trying to launch a product? Or how does this become relevant across the product life cycle? So product life cycle is the life cycle that any product that is launched goes through. So if you see the green line in the center, the graph, it talks about the different stages that a product goes through. The first stage is the introduction. The second stage is the growth. The third stage is the maturity. And the fourth is the decline. So every product, if you see, goes through these 4 stages. And the minute it reaches the stagnation stage, you need to reposition the product and you take it back to the introduction stage, and then the cycle goes on. So this is what is a PLC. Every product goes through this. Now, in an introduction stage, if you actually go through this, there are different types of studies that we can conduct at each and every of these stages. So if you look at the introduction, you can probably do something like a usage and attitude. You try and understand what the consumer wants. How does he use the product? What is the purchase basket? How does he or she, decide on what brand or what product that he needs to purchase? The second is about the idea. Idea is nothing but the concept. Now, once you do a concept, once you come out with an idea, it is important that you check it. You need to validate whether this idea is relevant to my target group, whom I'm trying to sell my product or service to. The third aspect is the product test. This is more so in the case of FMCG. In the case of service also, you can do it. But largely in the case of, say, let me take an example of shampoo. If it's an anti-dandruff shampoo, you might want to go and give people who are suffering from, having dandruff issues to try and keep the product for a specific amount of time. Now, you can't ask them to use it for one time and then give a kind of a feedback on that, because every product has its time which it will require to operate or be effective. Yeah, that is when you have a product test in place. Yeah. That is what you will try to do. The other aspects you can also check is the pricing, the packaging, what price the consumers are willing to pay for my product. How good is the packaging? How does this stand out versus competition? What is the need that I'm trying to satisfy? Is there a need that that the consumers want? Now let's look at an example. Henry Ford, when he launched the Model T back in early days of in the 20th century rather. What really happened was that he didn't do marketing research. He went and identified a need that the people then were actually having. Yeah. Because if you go and ask the consumer, what do you want? That's what he says. At that point in time, they would have said that they wanted faster horses or faster house carts. Yeah, because they have not seen the product. So it becomes very essential that you identify and map the consumer's need. And then you will also do brand positioning or product positioning and try and estimate what is the kind of sales that you can generate. So in all these aspects in the introduction stage, you can probably use marketing research. Yeah. The next stage is the growth. In the growth, you will do a communication development, that is an ad evaluation. You will try and identify what route I can take. When Dairy Milk says kuch meeta ho jaye, yeah, that's a route that they have taken. That is something that you want to understand whether this is something which is relevant to the end consumer. You may also want to track that once you launch the product, how good the product has performed. I've spent X amount of money, whether that money has actually been effective and lucrative for me. That is something that I want to identify. The third aspect is also about profiling. See, all of us will have our core PG. We will look at certain groups of people whom we want to market to. But at the end of the day, we only don't cater to them. We might also cater to people around them. So there could be some people whom we are not targeting, but they get attracted towards our proposition and they go and buy the product. And that's when you would want to identify who are these people who are also buying my product. And how does this impact the brand? So in terms of equity, in terms of promotions, in terms of the brand health, how does this impact? All this will also be a part of the growth and the maturity stages. Maturity is when it is actually picking up sales. And in the final stage, when in the case of decline, you will want to reposition yourself. So repositioning communication will come into play. Your pack will probably change. So when a Fair and Lovely now became Glow and Lovely, right? So when that change happened, whether the pack is equally attractive or it is not attractive. There have been cases wherein the pack change has happened and the brand has had to go back to the earlier pack because the consumers were not comfortable with the new pack. Yeah. So all this will be a part of the marketing research framework across the stages of the product life cycle. Yeah, we can go ahead. Now let's look at innovation per se. What I've tried to do in this is I've tried to break it down into various stages. So let's try and look at each of the stages. But having said that, what is important for us to note is 95% of the new launches fail. And this is not what I say. This is a report by Harvard Business Review in 2021, which says that nearly only 5% of the products that are launched see the light of the day. Yeah. Can we go ahead? Hence, it is always important to make an informed decision. But what I mean to say is the fact that you should not, in the process of this whole framework of marketing research, lose the marketing instinct. So that's the next point. Yeah. This means that there will be certain aspects which are beyond the purview of marketing research. And I, as an expert in this domain, or anyone, any agency that you will try and deal with, will tell you when to use marketing research effectively and when not to use. That is something that you need to be very, very careful of. Yeah, we can go ahead. So having said that, now let's look at where marketing research will help. The first case is the case of hypothesis building. From hypothesis building, what you'll try to do is you'll try to generate ideas. And I'll come to each and everything, how it'll be easy for us to identify this. The next stage is idea generation. So once you have hypothesis, you will go into try and probably create ideas which you want to validate. After you do that validation exercise, you might want to shortlist because you might have 50 ideas. You can't go, you don't have the resources to go ahead with all those 50 ideas at once. So you might want to prioritize. And that's where the shortlisting process comes into being. After this, you will review it and you will try to project and get the feedback from the consumer again after launch. So this is the entire framework that we keep on doing. We can go on to the next slide. So let's look at hypothesis building. I think this is a tip which I would want all of us to take away from this. One of the most effective ways and the most economic ways to identify the consumer's need is the process of consumer immersion. Now, what is a consumer immersion? Consumer immersion is the process wherein we go and meet our consumers who are our potential consumers. They could be our, for instance, if I'm a hair oil brand manager, say I'm a brand manager of Parachute, then what I will do is I will go ahead and meet consumers who are users of Parachute and who are not users of Parachute. So who are competition users. And I'll try and identify what is it that they are going through. What are the various facets of their life that we can tap with our product. Our product, remember, need not be the hero of the story. It is the consumer who is the hero of the story. The product is the facilitator in which or through which the consumer reaches his desired goal. And that is something which a consumer immersion is very effective in trying and identifying. So this is somewhere wherein you may want to meet consumers. You don't have to meet 50, 60 consumers. You can meet 6 or 8 consumers depending on the homogeneity of the consumers that you want to meet and get an idea of what they're feeling. Mind you, most of the ideas, are seeded, germinate from this aspect of consumer emotions. The other aspect is consumer or customer feedback. Now, the minute you launch a product, there are reviews which are put online. Now, there could be paid reviews as well, but not all reviews will be paid, right? So you may want to see what the consumer is also talking of. Where is it that you can make a difference? And where is it that you can fine-tune the product? The other aspect is also about existing learnings. Now, there will be existing learnings in the case of, we would have done some researches in the past. We can look at that. We can look, if you have not done research in the past, then we could look at secondary data which is available. There are many companies, MNCs or consulting firms which publish their reports. We can have a look at that, whether it's BCG, KPMG, Nielsen. All of these companies actually publish reports. And the last aspect is social listening. And this is where, again, from a customer feedback also, what the consumer is actually speaking. That is something that you will want to probably look at. And all these aspects will probably help you generate hypothesis. Yeah, that's the first aspect. We can go ahead. The second aspect is idea generation. Now, idea generation is where market researchers and the ones in brown are where we can step in. And the ones in green is where it's beyond the purview of marketing research. It could be either the company or it could be some other agency who can probably take this further. Yeah. But having said that, ideation workshops. Now, we have run a lot of ideation workshops. In my 16 years of my career, I've been a part of a lot of these workshops wherein we facilitate the entire process for the company we are working with. Yeah. So it could be the client. So where we probably call all the stakeholders who are involved. We look at their existing data. We probably in some cases also ask them to go and meet a fresh set of consumers or get their feedback from their existing customers and try and look at that. There could also be aspects wherein you can borrow from global innovations, right? So there are certain, for instance, let me look at, I've worked extensively in hair care, so I can tell you this example. There is the hair care map in the world. So you can look at which country has the similar hair care type as India. And then you can probably replicate the products which are being used there in India as well. Yeah, that could be a straight thing wherein you're trying to get, suppliers from there and try and relabel it and sell it here, or tweak it after a few, understanding. And that's something which we can look at. The other aspect, which is very important, is feedback or ideas from employees. Now, this is very important. See, I don't know how many of you know the Sony TV case, wherein in one of the cases, the Sony TV went, the boxes didn't have the TV at all. And they tried to invest a lot of money and they tried to look at that. And what the watchman of that factory did was he simply kept a fan in front of the line wherein the TVs were being loaded. The minute the fan was kept, if the box was empty, it would be blown away. So you don't need to reinvent the entire chain. You can do it. Your existing employees can give you a lot of ideas. And that's something that you want to cash on. The next slide, please. The other aspect is about once you do all this, once you generate ideas, once you have your hypothesis and generate ideas, you would want to shortlist these ideas. That's where you will go to your target group and identify and ask them which of these ideas resonate. Yeah. And that is something that marketing research, various companies have various techniques. Now, this is not about the techniques aspect, which technique is better, but this is one aspect which, marketing research can help you in shortlisting of the ideas. Yeah, we can go on. The next aspect is about the review and projections. So once you have your idea, you may want to, fine tune the idea. So see an idea, if I say, I want to launch a new phone, okay? When I say I want to launch a new phone, I can have various concepts wherein I want to launch a new phone. I may want to give better camera. I may want to talk of battery life. I may talk of features. I may talk of various other aspects of it. So the routes I can take to communicate this to the consumer can be very different. So I can choose whether I have to choose, what resonates. If I talk of the camera, does it resonate well with the consumer? If I talk on, say, features, does it resonate well with the consumer? Or if I talk on, say, battery life, does that resonate well with the consumer? What is it that the consumer identifies? And that's when you can do a concept test. Once you do the concept test, you can also do a product test. So you can give the product or a prototype and ask the consumers to use the product depending on the product in the blind or branded form. When I say blind, I don't tell them what brand it is from. I can say this is a mobile phone. You can just use it. I don't say whether it's Oppo or Samsung or Vivo for that matter. Yeah, that is something which I say. That is in the blind form. In the branded, I will tell them that this is a Samsung mobile phone. And I want you to tell me how good, bad, or ugly this is. I can also do a product pricing assessment, wherein I can ask them what is the range at which you can play with. Because every product, if all of us as consumers, if I give you any product, you will have a range in your mind. I will say that I will pay for an hair oil, I will pay anything between 50 rupees to 100 rupees. The minute it becomes 105, I will not pay. Okay, that's the range I will play with. Or if it becomes 200, obviously it's beyond my purview. So I don't think it's value for money. So that is where I try and assess what is the range I can play with. Packaging evaluation, whether the packaging stands out in the clutter, in the shop shelf, how does it look, ad evaluation. Or if you want to do everything, you can do pricing, you can do pack, you can do concept and product in the mixed evaluation. Ad evaluation generally we may not want to do in this. There are some cases we do that also, but the last point, which is the mixed evaluation, is an amalgamation of all that, which is on top, except for ad evaluation at times. Yeah, we can go ahead. And then it is about the feedback. So it's about the post-launch assessment and the distribution and consumption assessment. See, now, what do I mean by a post-launch? I would have done a lot of activation. So most of us would have seen on Times of India, you get sometimes a sachet of a shampoo or product, of a hair oil or a conditioner, which is attached. Yeah. So I want to see how many people have probably used that sachet after, getting it. Because many people, as many of us will probably take the sachet and keep it in our cupboard. We may not end up using that also. But at the end of the day, we want to see whether that has had an impact or not. Whether the ad that I've launched, how is that resonating with the consumers? Are the consumers, associating it with my brand or with the competition? There are cases wherein they see a hair oil ad and they don't attribute it to, say, Parachute. They may attribute it to, say, a Dabur or vice versa. That's something which you want to probably look at. Distribution and consumption. Now, while this is early days, as soon as you launch it, it may be very difficult to, assess this in terms of distribution and consumption. We may want to evaluate this at specific time frames. So you may want to do it after 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years, to see how the distribution is panning out or how the consumption is actually going about. Now, there are companies who, syndicated data, which is available for this. This is a part of marketing research, but you don't need to do customized in this case. Yeah. So there are companies who help you with all this. So these are the stages in which the marketing research can help you through the different 5 stages. Yeah, we can go ahead. So having said all of this, what really happens is you can then get all the pieces of the jigsaw. When I say the jigsaw puzzle, it's about the idea, it's about the concept, it's about the product, it's about the price, it's about the distribution, it's about the packaging, everything. How does that actually come into place and help you to gain more consumer insights? So this, ladies and gentlemen, this is something which marketing research can help you, identify and help you with your product journey. This is something which I wanted to leave you with. Yeah. So, yeah. But having said this, what is very important for all of us is to identify what is the type of innovation that you are dealing with. Now, let me explain this. There are 4 different types of innovation. So can you just click one more time? Once more, sir. Once more, please. Yeah. So there is, I'll go from right to left, which is the quick launch. I may not have as much time to go through the elaborate process of going through the idea through, evaluating the post-launch. So I may want to pick and choose. Depending on that, we as market researchers also tell you what to do and what not to do. So this is one type of innovation which comes into place. Now, having said this, a quick launch may, if it's something which is new to the world, wherein people have not heard of this before, then it might be very difficult to assess. But if it's a product which is, there is a slight tweak. For instance, let me give you an example. It's a car. Now Tata Nexon came up with an electric vehicle, right? Many of us have actually gone and bought it. Now we know what the car is all about. We know it's an electric vehicle, what it will do. It's not something which is out of the world. Yes, the concept is different, but it's a quick launch. I may not want to evaluate this completely. Yeah, so I may want to do bits and pieces in this. Incremental. What do I mean by incremental? So supposing I have a 100-gram pack of a hair oil or a 100-gram pack of fairness cream or any cold cream. I may want to launch a 50-gram pack. I may want to launch a 200-gram pack. So that is incremental, wherein I'm getting more stock keeping units. In that case, whether you want to do the entire frame of reference in terms of research or not, that is something that we can probably discuss. The other aspect is booster. Now, what do I mean by booster? Booster is something wherein you are in the hair oil category, but you are also getting into the conditioner space. You are also getting into the shampoo space. You are playing in the skincare domain, wherein you're looking at cold creams. You may also want to get into the antiseptic creams domain. You may, so you get the gist of it, right? So you're trying to foray into different aspects, which is already existing. But it is a slightly different category that I'm trying to play. And last but not the least is new to the world. Now in 2006, when iPhone was launched, it was new to the world, or iPods were launched before that. It was new to the world. You may want to look at this type of innovation in a very different light. This is somewhere wherein in each of these 4 cases, you will have to tailor make the type of research that you're trying to deal with in each of these cases. And this will also have a filter of the category and the product that you're dealing with. It will also have a filter of what is the evolution of the market, how evolved the consumers are, because that's where you will want to ask the type of questions which make sense to those sets of consumers. So these are the 4 aspects that you'll also have to consider while deciding what is the marketing research you need to conduct. Yeah. Now let's look at the last aspect of it, the pandemic impact. Now, people tell me that marketing research is largely a face-to-face game. Yes, it is. Indeed, it is. But the pandemic has, changed the way all of us do business, right? So if you go to the next slide, what has really happened in the case of marketing research is that we've had a lot of consumer emotions. Now, I get it that you don't get the essence of going and meeting the consumer in their home. I've done a lot of immersions wherein I've visited the kitchens of people and tried to observe how they cook their meal. Just by observation, talking to them in the process, you learn a lot. So that is something which becomes very, very superficial with Zoom. But having said that, it still goes on. We are not able to go there. But in many cases, we can also do Zoom. We do shorter interviews, which are more effective in nature. There has been a technological intervention. So there are companies which gamify their entire research process, and that is something which, in the process of a game, you answer a series of questions and then you can get that information. But what really comes into being is that the industry has not been restricted to any geography. Now, today, sitting here, I can probably look at clients in Australia or New Zealand or Indonesia for that matter. Yeah. But the emphasis of all this is that we have tried to get different facets of the pie of the consumer, look at learnings from different facets. So what we also do is we look at the different facets of it, from social listening, from reviews, from older marketing research, from the sales data, and try and collate the entire learning. So this is where the entire process has also come into being. Yeah. And that's about it. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. Yeah, over to you, Sharanya.
Okay, thank you so much, Aditya. I think that was a very detailed look at how market research can help you, not just in one part of the process, right? Usually, I think as young companies, we start thinking about it as, when we start something, we need to know what the consumer wants. And then they sort of lose out sight of that as we go down the journey that you spoke about, the product launch cycle. So if anybody has any questions, do add, put it on the comment section. You will be able to see this session, the recorded version of the session on the Social Beat YouTube page. I think a lot of people have asked about that. I had a few questions as well, Aditya. I think I'll probably get to that before I get into the questions by the audience. The first one is that, you mentioned that you work with a lot of small and medium business companies. And from whatever experience that we've also had from the work that we've done is that, one time is very, very precious for them. So they just want to get things done really fast. And secondly, they, sort of think that, do we need to do this? Is it really necessary to do research? What am I going to gain? Because sometimes they do get lost in the whole point of, I know what the product is going to offer to the consumer, and I know that the consumer needs this, and then they try and run with that. So you also mentioned that certain times you don't need to do research. You can get data in other form. So while we did discuss where research is necessary, where is research not necessary, and when do we take that decision, and based on what criteria do we make that decision that at this point in time I need to do research?
See, it depends on the criticality of the whole thing. So let me answer this question in two ways. One is, if it's a new to the world product, okay, and you go to a certain set of consumers who's your target audience, you may not want the idea to be leaking out, to your competition. That's something which you may not want to do research in that sense, in that kind of a scenario. But having said that, if you have a few trusted clients, you don't need to do the entire research, but you may want to, give the product or service to them for a certain period of time. So there are many people who give, if it's a service company, I have a few friends in SAP who say that we will give you a month free service, so that when you're using the product, whether that product is actually meeting your expectations or not. So that is something which you can probably do on the go, and that's something which you end up doing. So there are multiple ways in which you can do it. But one thing which I will always tell you is that, probably people will argue whether consumer is the king today or not. Whether you want to call him the king or you want to say that you want to look at it very differently. But talking to the consumer helps a lot, okay? Or the customer. You may just want to have a conversation with them, not about your category, but just what about they're going through in their life. If you look at celebrating happy moments, when Cadbury Dairy Milk talks about that, it is not about the product. It is about the experience that they're giving. So Dairy Milk is, by the way, in the whole story. Similarly, a shampoo where a Clinic Plus talks about, the bond between the mother and the daughter, or a Parachute talks about, the bond between different relationships, whether it's the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, husband-wife, mother-daughter. How does that actually vary? So it's the product placement, which is, by the way, it's more about the relationship which matters. And the magic really happens is when you know your customer well or your consumer well. So that's when you will want to do. Whether you do the entire framework, that's something which can be discussed, because that will be case to case basis. In certain cases, I tell the client, don't do it. It doesn't work. Okay. But in cases wherein, in such cases, then a consumer immersion might help, because you may want to just go and talk to them. Just spend the day with them and see how things work. It sometimes work wonders.
Understood. I think there was a question just similar from the audience that I also had. So a lot of the startups who are starting out, they are low in time, low in budget. So when it comes to market research for their products or their offerings, what are the few things that they usually like to know from you within the limited crunch of time sometimes, or due to various reasons, right? So what are the few queries that they come to you for, and what are the main things they can keep in mind while, what are the right questions to ask when it comes to market research?
See, the key in this case is to prioritize your questions. Okay. So a lot of companies come to me and say, I want to know the profiling of the consumer. So can you give me a complete psychographic and a demographic understanding of what the consumer is all about? And whom can I go after? So who is the right target audience for me? And that's where we, help them with their own data, or we do a little bit more research depending on where they are in the entire research journey, and we help them with that. So that is one aspect. The second aspect is, what is it that the existing offerings don't offer, or how can we tweak our offerings to suit the consumer requirement much more? So these are the two most often asked questions which we deal with. The other aspect is, see, a startup will want to do a lot many things within limited budgets, but the whole idea which I will always tell them is to prioritize it, because a consumer's attention span is only limited. So within that limited attention span, you want to get to know about him or her. Then you will want to probably look at your product or service. Then you may want to talk about the idea and get a feedback. Yeah, so you're doing that entire funnel approach. You're going broad to narrow. So in the whole scheme of things, if you prioritize that, what is the level of questions which is very important from a business perspective? So let me give you an example. If I say that, say I want to launch a new snack, I want to know what are the new flavors that I can probably launch the snack in. Okay, so in this case, I should not ask what is the pack size, which will be relevant or which will be good enough for the consumer. I should focus on the flavor, the aftertaste. What does it actually? What do they eat with? What do they eat after? These are all important questions, because the tingling sensation or the lingerability, as they say, of the flavor also will be basis the fact that what they have eaten before, or how they eat what they're eating next. So that is also very important. In the case of fragrances, it becomes even more important, because you can't keep on making them smell fragrances one after the other. So you have to give them a break. You have to give them coffee beans or a neutralizer, and then give them the other one. So it varies from situation to situation. And I think the way I work with my clients is I tell them to prioritize. Very extremely important, good to know, and can be postponed. Okay. And that's where we look at what is the business problem that we are looking at and solve that first. Uske baad baki sab to ho jayega.
Great. Yeah, makes sense. I mean, the priority list becomes important because you want to ask as many questions as possible, but what is most important to you?
Yes.
I think there's one last question that I take from Namrata Nagaraj. Will a startup also follow the same graph or course which you showed, which is the product life cycle, or will there be a need for us to bring in a different methodology?
See, it depends on what is the category the startup is in. It can't be one size fits all for everything. So we'll have to look at it. We'll have to talk on, supposing it's an FMCG startup, we may not want to do the entire thing. We may want to pick and choose even between this. If it's a finance startup, we may want to do the concept for sure. Yeah. And then we may want to also check the product, whether that's product, for instance, when Paytm was launched, you're putting money on that app. Yeah. And you're paying that money to someone else. What if there is the money gets lost somewhere in the middle? What will you end up doing? The security is very important. So I can't go and ask Paytm to, give the consumer data to me, because that is, again, they're like a bank at the end of the day. So you need to also look at it from that perspective. If it's an automobile, then it's a very different kind of a genre that you're trying to deal with. So you may want to showcase the product, the end product to them. You may want to showcase the finishing, the roughness of it, and so on and so forth. So all that matters. So even in a startup, one size fits all approach will not work. Okay, you'll have to look at it from a case by case basis. But what will be constant is knowing your consumer, knowing who your client or who your end consumer is. Try and be as razor focused as you can, because the minute you're razor focused, you will not focus on everyone else. If if someone from beyond that comes into your domain, you're obviously not going to tell them no, but your communication is targeted to one person who should feel that the minute I see this, the communication, he should feel that he's talking to me. He's not talking to anyone else. So that's the whole point that you're looking at. So once you're razor focused on that consumer set, your game.
I think I have one last question. You did mention about the idea, the process of brainstorming for an idea, right? So typically what happens with researchers is that there is, like you said, there is another agency who comes into the picture, and then they take the whole creative process forward. And then sometimes it feels like, your work is done there, and then it's taken forward by somebody else. But you did make a very compelling point that we have a role to play there as well. Could you sort of elaborate a little bit about how even the idea generation process can be benefited by market research? Because that's not usually the way people like to look at things, because creativity is, we leave it to the artists and let them decide what the creative journey needs to be like. So if you could sort of elaborate a little bit, I think we have a few more minutes.
So see, idea generation is an ideation workshop. So it can be done by market researchers, or there are facilitators. So we work as facilitators in the whole workshop. So it can be depending on the category. You can do that workshop. It can be a 2-day workshop. It could be a 3-day workshop. It could be a single day workshop. But what we end up doing is we end up collating all the data which the client has in that case. Okay. So he may have certain information which is already existing. His sales data, his competitive information, that is also available in the syndicated data for frame of reference. You may look at global case studies, how the cultural dimensions are changing across the globe. You may want to get all those learnings, which are, again, this is a funnel. So you start with the tip wherein you're getting it as broad as you can. You're not restricting it to a category. Then you come back to the category and then try and, get it down. So what we try to do is we try to get the key stakeholders. When you're looking at key stakeholders, we mean the advertising agency, the marketing team, the creative team, the R&D team, the sales guys, whoever is involved in this entire packaging, whoever is involved in the entire process, because innovation can also be in the case of packaging. You don't need to innovate the product. You can just innovate the pack and that will be all. Yeah. So that is something which you want to probably get all these people in the room, and we facilitate the entire thing. So we show them what are the various products which are there in the global context. How are the cultural dimensions changing? What is the paradigm going on? How is the category evolved over a period of time? What are the attitudes of people? How are those changing? Attention span dwindling. All this will come into being. And we try and we make fewer groups of people and ask them to come up with ideas. So we give them various themes and we ask them to, come up with ideations. And that's where, we've done a workshop wherein within 2 days, we generated 150 ideas, or maybe I think more, 200 ideas. And then we had to shortlist it. So some of it were overlaps, so we brought it down to 120. And from 120, then we again shortlisted, depending on what is our capability, what are the resources we have currently, and then take things further from there. Because we don't have the resources and the money to put in everything at the same time. So that's how it works.
Yeah, very interesting. I think sometimes we feel like when we're doing research, it's only about numbers and it's good to know information. But when it comes to the creative process, leave it to the experts is sort of the attitude we sometimes get. So great. I think the whole process of weaving the two together is also very, very important. Sort of understanding that if there is an insight, how do we creatively communicate that, and working together as a team and getting all of them together in the same place becomes very, very crucial, I think.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you don't want to, you want to work as a team, as a collective unit. You ensure that you're a well-oiled machine and you ensure that the product is a success. And that's when the products are successes. Otherwise, you will have certain facets of it which are brilliant. But there have been many cases. In fact, giants like Unilever, P&Gs have also failed, but they've done some things which are extremely successful. For instance, Dove is an extremely successful case study. Yeah, Pampers is an extremely successful case study. So these are things which you will want to probably also look at. At the end of the day, we are facilitators to what the consumer says, whether it's in terms of numbers, whether it's in terms of consumer speak, whether it's in terms of integration of the whole thing. It's up to us to make the data look more rich. And that's what marketing research is all about.
Great. I think that's a fantastic note to sort of conclude the session. Thank you so much, Aditya, for taking out time in the middle of the week on a Tuesday to connect with us. And it's been wonderful to, hear through your thoughts. And I think it sort of gives a very comprehensive, complete approach to looking at market research and not a very staggered and fragmented way of doing it, because sometimes we do get into that rut of just doing bits and pieces and then somehow, telling a story out of that. So thank you so much for your time. And you can reach out to us, Social Beat, and all the social media channels. Aditya is also available on LinkedIn, so you can get in touch with him there. The recording of this session will be available at the Social Beat YouTube channel. So if you want to sort of recap on everything that we discussed today, you can go and visit our page. Thank you, everybody, for joining this session. Hope you have a nice evening. Thanks again, Aditya. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Sharanya. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.